Acts 27. So it starts with saying, my little title in my Bible. I've taken mine from the NIV, but it's pretty much very similar to the ESV, and then same story, whatever version you use. So yeah, Paul sails for Rome. So Paul's just had this like tricky time with Felix, and has had a trial. So he's come straight out of one trial and is going to sail straight into another one as a prisoner on his way to see Caesar. And so he's in like a place of trouble, but he's also in a place of transition. He's moving from one place to another. And God often does the most work in our lives during times of trouble and times of transition and change. We don't like change, it's difficult for us. We might have to rely on God more, or we might avoid relying on God, but in reality we have to during that trial and that change and that trouble. So we've kind of got to be encouraged that even though things are hard during those times, God's doing lots in us. And also during those times, God's favour is still upon us. You see that whilst Paul is having this trial, you see that with Felix beforehand, in Acts 24, verse 23, he has God's favour because he's allowed his friends to look after him and meet his needs. And we see here, Acts 27, verse 3, Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so that they might provide for his needs. He's a prisoner, he shouldn't really be allowed these things, but God's got favour over him. And you even see it then when he ends up in Rome and he's allowed to live on his own and have a guard. Yeah. So he has, even in the midst of these really difficult trials where he's a prisoner and he's kind of trapped, he has got God's favour over his life during those times. And it's like that for us. We might not see it, but we do get special treatment. Mm-hmm. So Paul actually always wanted to go to Rome anyway. He said, like way back in Acts 19, he was going to go to these different places, and then he said, and I must visit Rome also. So this actually was always part of his plan, but probably going in chains on a big ship was part of his plan. Yeah. So his desire was being met, and his vision and his dream was being realised, but not in the way he would expect it or would want it. But God still had a plan. It's like that with us. Sometimes our dream is free, our vision is free, but our journey and how we get there sometimes might cost us. It might not be in a way that we would expect, but through it not being, excuse the pun, like plain sailing, God does something amazing in this story. So it's worth him going through it in the less than kind of conventional way. So I really want to focus on the journey. So Luke tells us the journey, and he's super, super vivid. He's really descriptive, and I love stories that are descriptive. Sandy's always lending me books, and one of the ones we were reading the other week, we were talking about it. Like, if you've got a book with loads of detail, it just paints the picture so much more clearly for you. And this one is super clear, and it's just been noted as being really historically accurate because of the points that they say, the time of year that they were sailing, it was going to be winter. They had to go at a good time, otherwise they were going to hit storms and they were going to have a difficult time. So they had to try and like stop at certain places and be sensible along the way, because the area was known for being like treacherous and unsaleable during the winter. And it's all completely like accurate, and it's really nautically like accurate as well. Like all the sailors' terms that are used and stuff are really good. And I just thought that if it's there, like what's the text telling us? He's trying to tell us something with all these specific names. And I just kind of like got my mind blown really with the journey that he goes on. So I kind of want to skim through that really. So in verse 1, it says that he's going to sail to Italy. So I looked at what Italy meant. And Italy means abounding in calves. As in like, the baby cows, not as in our legs. And I was like, okay, any importance in that? And I looked at the biblical symbolism of calves. They were actually regarded in high esteem. They were often used, the fattened calves were often used in sacrifice. Yeah. So the Jews regarded them as being really, really important. And so Italy, being a place abounding in calves, was a massive place of importance. And I couldn't work out, okay, well, why is it so important? But in Paul being able to go see Caesar and actually be in front of him, he had to speak to him. and therefore he had to make his case for his faith, and then also gave the opportunity, like some historians have said and theologians have said, that it was his chance and opportunity to get Christianity seen as a separate religion to Judaism. So it was really important. It was just a place full of VIPs that he really needed to go. But he boarded the ship from, my pronunciation is going to be hilarious, Adramyttium, which means the court of death. So he'd just been in this court. And actually they say beforehand, this man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment. He doesn't deserve it, but he's bound in chains. Yeah. I thought that's really amazing, because sometimes people don't deserve it, sometimes we don't deserve it. We feel like, why are we bound in chains? But it's for God's purpose. So yeah, he's leaving the court of death to go to the place, a very important place. And it says that the ship that they managed to get hold of was about to sail to the province of Asia, which is described as being like boggy and muddy. And I think sometimes you can be in scenarios in your life that just feel like you're stuck in a bog, like it's just down, you cannot get your feet out of it, it's just feels horrific. But there's hope in the boat. Well, it's not hope in the boat, it's hope in the next person that I want to mention. In verse 2, they had someone special with them. They had this guy who was a fellow prisoner. But I just thought it was really bizarre that he was mentioned. Aristarchus is a Macedonian from Thessalonica, and he was with them. I was like, okay, well, what's the deal of that? And his name means the best prince. And I was like, oh yeah, Jesus is in the boat. And it gets better because he's a fellow prisoner, and Jesus gets us.
Yeah.
He gets us. He has been in our shoes. So he's alongside us. And he's a Macedonian, and Macedonia meant burning or adoration. So it's like he's got your faith that is in Jesus. But he's from Thessalonica, which means victory. So it doesn't matter that he's come from the court of death, because he's got his faith in the best prince and his adoration in the best prince, and he's going to have victory. So that really excited me. But then they had to land at this other place, which wasn't so great. So they landed at Sidon, and Sidon means hunting. And that verse 3 is where it says Paul's allowed to have his friends, and so he had favour. So even when we feel like we're being hunted, like even when the enemy's on our back, we still have God's favour, and we mustn't forget it. Which is really hard to not in those times you feel really frightened, don't you?
Yeah.
So then in verse 4, they passed Cyprus because the winds were against us. And I thought, oh my gosh, how do we often feel like in life that the winds are against us? No matter what we're trying to do, things are against us. And Cyprus actually means fairness. And so many things happen to us, I think, where we feel like, well, this isn't fair. I didn't deserve this. I can't do anything. Why am I why are the winds against me? Then verse 5, they sailed across the open sea, off Cilicia and Pamphylia. And those two places mean overturn and a nation made of every tribe. And I just felt really encouraged that Jesus has that power. Yes. He can overturn every nation, and he can, overturn every tribe. And especially think in terms of where we're at, like in the world politically, everything seems like it's going crazy. And I just think we got to have faith and encouragement in Jesus, that he's got that ability. They landed then at Myra, which is in Lycia. And Myra means to pour out and weep. And Lycia means wolf. And I just thought it was really interesting. They stopped at somewhere, and we have points in our journey in our lives where we do pour everything out and we're weeping and we've got nothing left. And there are times in our lives also where there are wolves prowling in sheep's clothing. Sometimes we've got that story in the Bible that mentions that, but I think we can feel really nervous and fearful that there are things prowling out to get us, and we're being set upon, and that there are tears in our journey in life. it feels like this story's getting really depressing when you continue to go through these things, but it's really important that it starts to like really highlight, as those things have all happened so far. We've had like, you know, no fairness, the winds are against us, we're weeping, we've got wolves after us, we feel hunted, all those negative things have happened, and that slows us down. And verse 7 says there was slow headway for many days, and they had difficulty arriving at Cnidus, and that means age. And I love that, there's slow headway for many days. And it feels like that. It's really hard. Aging is hard. Getting older is hard. Growing up is hard. Whatever stage and age you're at in your life, the next bit always seems like, this is getting more difficult than it was last time. I thought this stuff would get easier. I thought I'd be more experienced. I thought I'd get it more. I thought I'd be better at this than this age or whatever. And it's difficult. I just thought enough said. And the wind did not allow us to hold our course. So even though we're trying to get places, sometimes we get sideswept, we get pushed about, and no matter how much we try and fix our sights on the course that we've got for our lives, or that even God's got for our lives, we get blown about. And as a result, they got blown about and they sailed to the lee of Crete. And Crete stands for flesh. And I think that really storms can push us to our fleshly desires because we're weak in the storms, and it says we have difficulty, and we rely on our flesh. And what was really interesting is the Crete, the area that it was opposite. It mentions it was opposite Salmon, which means clothed. And Neil and I was chatting, and I was like, you know, we're supposed to be clothed in righteousness. But the reality is the opposite of that is really just relying on our flesh. Yeah. And so as much as we want to do that, when these storms come and we have difficulty, we do rely on our flesh as opposed to being clothed in our righteousness. Yeah. So in those times we need to try and like ask for God's help to be able to do that. Verse 8 tells us that they then moved along the coast. Again, it tells us with great difficulty. So difficulty again, but even bigger difficulty. But then they came to a place called Fair Havens, near the town of Lasea, which meant wise. And I just thought if you kind of break that down, it shows us that it's with great difficulty that it takes us to come to a good place with wisdom. Wisdom isn't easily earned or easily achieved. We've got to go through great difficulty. So we always talk about our hindsight being such a blessing to us. We've had to earn that. We've had to get through it. Our wisdom has come from kind of like going through this crap, like. Yeah. And as a result, you know, of these great difficulties, verse 9 tells us that much time had been lost and it had become dangerous. And I think sometimes when we lose time, like we talk all the time about life being short, and we're losing time is dangerous. It really is dangerous to us. It's dangerous. Wasting our own time is really dangerous. Feeling like we're not getting anywhere can be dangerous. But also it can be exhausting. So that's maybe why it's dangerous too, because we just get worn out. And at that point, Paul warned them, which makes me laugh because Paul's an expert on most things, isn't he? But Paul's a prisoner, so he was cheeky doing it. And I thought it was quite interesting that we've just come from that place of wisdom. And it's like almost Paul's representing wisdom as like the vocal piece for the word of God at this point. Yeah. And so he tries to advise the pilot and the ship owner, which is just really ironic because surely a ship owner and a pilot know better than a preacher, but he still has a go because he's got God, because he sees something they don't. Yeah. But the centurion didn't listen to them. He didn't listen to Paul, sorry. He went with experience and sense, because those people had experience that Paul didn't in those fields, and they had the common sense in those fields. They understood things that Paul, the prisoner, Paul, the former Christian catcher, now turned preacher, wouldn't know. So he was ignored, and they warned him, and he warned them, and it didn't matter because the centurion listened to the people who looked more reliable. Because he went with his sight. But that doesn't matter. Sense doesn't matter, sight doesn't matter, and experience doesn't matter. The reality is when we're on our journeys, spirit matter and faith matter.
Yeah.
And that's hard as well, because sometimes we think, well, what about our experiences? But if Paul's anything to go by, you'd have never got on a boat again. If you were Paul, if you went by your experience, you go for not getting on a boat again, you'd done 2 more
What
shipwrecks.
happened last time, man?
Yeah.
It's important that you got back on the boat again. You can't always trust your experience for things to be the same. They sailed on, hoping to reach Phoenix. And I love that we saw the word hope in this story. And Phoenix meant the land of palm trees, and I thought that sounds really nice. They sailed on to hope to reach Phoenix and have winter there. And who wouldn't want to spend winter in a place with palm trees? It sounds really lovely. This harbour, though, was in Crete, which means flesh. So those things that, sometimes can really be really appealing to us on a fleshly level because they look nice. Oh, winter is a hard season, it's a cold season, it's a difficult season. It's quite often a miserable season in our lives. So of course we want to go somewhere pretty with palm trees and have a little vacation. But that harbour's in flesh, and we don't want to put ourselves harboured up in a place of flesh.
Yeah.
And then verse 13 is where it kind of all really goes wrong. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they thought they had obtained what they wanted. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete, which I can't stop just saying flesh now. And I really love the NLT version of that verse. The sailors thought they could make it, so they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. I think that's totally us. I can totally relate to it. It's a nice little gentle south breeze. Oh, it's nice. Lovely. Things are okay now. We don't need to go on a different plan for winter. We can make it. We'll make it through. We'll beat those storms, because if it carries on like this, we'll be okay. And they lifted their anchor. And I do it all the time. I'm like, me and God are there. My hope is in Him. My anchor's firmly set. We're on our merry way. And then things look all right, and I lift my anchor. And it's at that point that things go completely wrong. Because verse 14 goes to tell us, in the NLT it says, but the weather changed abruptly. In the NIV it says, and a wind of hurricane force, called the northeaster, swept down from the island. The ship was caught up by the storm, could not head into the wind, so we gave into it and were driven along. They completely lost control because this hurricane force wind came off the back of a little gentle breeze that looked fine, and they thought they could make it. Apparently this hurricane, this word that they use for hurricane, and this northeaster is like, it was a proper sailor's term. And I looked at what kind of like the biblical symbolism was of north and east. And north can be disaster and destruction. And east can mean good or bad. It depends whether you're looking at before the fall or after the fall.
This is God, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's, a place of security and safety,
Yes.
looking at where Eden was. But then when they were exiled, east, it's not good. It can be a place of exile. And I think when you've lifted your anchor, you're probably talking after your fall, aren't you? So this disastrous, destructive, exiling wind, and it does exile them because it exiles them off the course they're on. They're driven along by this. The wind blew against their purpose, and they lose control and complete direction of where they're going. And I don't know if anybody else has ever felt like that in their life. I have, / kind of am fairly recently, feeling like, oh my God, I don't know where I'm going, Lord help me, as I get driven along. And the thing is that like we think we can predict things. The last 2 days, me and my neighbour, and Neil was with me the one day, I've been outside sort of laughing, going, I'm getting soaked. The weather has just out of nowhere completely turned, and your washing's getting soaked, and it was beautiful, and there was a breeze, and the sun was shining, and everything was fine. And it happened on the one day, and we were all out there, we were laughing about it. The next day, Helen and I were laughing less, because it was the same washing we put up the day before. And she said to me, and I was in the kitchen, I'd been listening to Anchor, and I was preparing for this in the kitchen as I was doing bits and bobs. And I had to run back in after I spoke to her and write down this. She said, do you know, I've got 2 weather apps, and I watched the news, and this was completely unpredictable. She said, none of it was mentioned. It said it was supposed to be beautiful sunshine today. We shouldn't be having this weather. And I was like, oh, it's crazy. You can't predict anything, can you? And I ran and was like, no, you really can't. You really can't predict anything. Except God.
Yes.
I'm so glad we sang that song. And it mentioned he's unchanging, because that's what I've written down. Life is unpredictable. It changes. Plans change. You know, the breakdown of her relationship, and she was like, it's not the same person I fell in love with. They've changed completely. Situations change. Our jobs change. Our circumstances, our homes, all these different things change. Except God. He is the unchanging one. Malachi 3:6. I, the Lord, do not change. So in amongst all this change and unpredictability, we know that he is secure, he is reliable, and he is safe. Thank God for that. Praise him for that, because we'd be stuffed otherwise. So back to the storm, verse 16. It gets worse, bless them. As they passed the lee of, I wrote this so small I can't read it. 2 seconds.
Clouder.
That's it, Clouder. Can't read my own writing. We were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. Clouder means lamentable voice. And I think when we're at a point, I think that we're even our lifeboats, which kind of I see as being our plan Bs, you know? We've got our lifeboats, we've got our backup plan. In case of emergency, please break, you know? We'll jump in there, and it's a smaller ship, but it'll just about get us there. They were hardly able to make their lifeboat secure. I think that probably I would have a lamentable voice if I was on the ship at that point. I would be screaming and crying, and I'm sure there were like plenty of lamentable voices on Paul's ship. Verse 17, it says that they were frightened, fearing that they would run aground in the sandbars of Syrtis. And that means quicksand, that place. And at that point, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. So at that point, when the fear was there, they dropped anchor. And that's when it kicks back in for me. When the breeze is there and it looks all right, I lift it. And when the fear kicks in, I drop it again. And I think, well, thankfully, God's gracious and he doesn't mind me. I'm sure he'd prefer I didn't. But, you know, he's gracious to me and goes, okay, yeah, you know, I'm here. I'll steady you. But I thought about quicksand. Have you ever seen The Neverending Story, everybody? Just traumatised me. The quicksand, Atreus' horse. And the more he struggles and he's pulling him, it's so rapid, his death. It's terrified me of quicksand. But it's so poignant. As soon as I thought of quicksand, I thought of Atreus' horse. And I thought the more he struggled through it, the more you try and get out, you are hopeless. You will get sucked in. And it's no wonder they were frightened of the quicksand. They realised that their anchor was not just like important, it was needed. And it just shows that fear must be counteracted with hope. How many times in the Bible do we hear, do not fear, and then it'll be something like, for I am with you.
Yes.
So don't be afraid, hope.
Yeah.
Do not fear, something else, and I'm not going to say that one because it's going to steal the end of my preach. But yeah, we've got to counteract our fear with our hope, with our hope in him though, in the right things. But by this point they were already into this journey and the storm was coming and they didn't have much choice. So at this point they took such a violent battering from the ship. The next day they began to throw cargo overboard. It was at this point just less light in the load. They took a violent battering. I don't know if anybody else has ever felt in their life that they've had a violent battering by their life or a situation or a circumstance. That's a horrible, horrible place to be in. And what was important that they did was lighten the load. The stuff that they did not need at that point, just get rid of. I love it. On the third day, so it's always nice things happen on the third day, they threw more over. They threw the tackle over with their own hands. It was like, stuff it, let's just get rid of this stuff. We don't need it, lighten the load. Full on desperation. those things in the ship don't matter anymore. And they're actually weighing them down. And the things that we fill our
Lives.
ships with and our lives with that are so important to us, which are actually quite practical. You know, cargo, it's important things to help run the ship.
Stuff.
Tackle, things you
Stuff.
need. But it doesn't matter because it's not actually going to help you at this point. It's not going to help you through. And also, I just thought, bless them, 3rd day. So they've had 3 days in this hideous storm. And it goes on. And it can feel like that. Life can really feel like that. Verse 20. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up. This is such a sad verse. We finally gave up all hope of being saved. And I think that can totally happen to us in our lives. That can happen to so many people around us. Just give up hope of being saved. Because it's days. Excuse me. That's caught me off guard. So they needed the sun and stars, not just to be like, okay, how many days are we on now? 1, 2, 3. They needed it for direction. So it actually, this verse symbolises when we have no direction and we have no light, we have no hope. We lose the plot. When we don't know where we're going and we can't see any light, everything seems dark. That is really when we lose hope. And that is when we finally give up.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to remember, but we do have hope.
Yeah.
There are some people that don't.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Amen.
And they have those times where they can't see the light. And it's like we got to help them see that hope. But the story gets good. It gets better because we see the hope now. Verse 21, after the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up, which I think is epic because firstly he waits till they're really hungry and they're weak to speak up. Because it's probably not a good idea to speak up beforehand because they'd be like, shut up Paul, sit down, you don't know what you're talking about, we're sailors. So he waited till they were weak. But also I thought it was amazing that Paul was able to stand up on the boat in this raging ship, the raging storm, sorry. And he stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and this loss. And I really feel like he just represents God speaking to us sometimes. Guys, you should have listened. I don't mean to say it, but I told you so. Only person that's got hurt in this is you. You're the one that's bruised and battered, that's lost half your stuff overboard, and you're now stuffed, and you need my help. Why didn't you listen? But it's like I always think whenever I read "but" in the Bible now, I think of Furtick, "but" in the Bible. Thank God for "but." But now I urge you to keep up your courage. And it's amazing because I bet they were looking around thinking, "Are you joking?" Because not one of you will be lost. Only he throws this away. Only the ship will be destroyed. But you're going to be okay. And sometimes you've got to see that that's actually hopeful. The ship, the stuff, whatever our ship is, might get smashed up. It might get completely wrecked and destroyed. Not even just like battered or a bit broken. It says destroyed. It'll be gone. Are we okay with that? Like sometimes we probably aren't, because it depends what I suppose our ship symbolises, what our boat symbolises. What are our ships? What do we put in our faith and trust and security in our lives? If it was our home and I was going to get destroyed, would we be okay with it? If it was our job, would we be okay with it? If it was our family, would we be okay with it? But you will not be lost. And this is why he can say it. And this is amazing. And I love this next section. Verse 23 and 24. Last night an angel of the God, whose I am and whom I serve. I was like, oh my God, can I say that? Can I say that about me? Whose I am and whom I serve. Stood beside me. Like he's beside us in the ship. And said, do not be afraid, Paul. And I was like, oh, I bet the next bit's going to be epic. It's going to be really encouraging. And then it says, you must stand trial before Caesar.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. This might get worse. But, and God who has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So basically, chin up, Paul. Don't be frightened. You are going to go on trial. But he is a present. you want salvation for 276 people? Here it is.
Come on, that's good. Yeah.
So he then relays it, and I just wanted to just point out as well
It's on
that
the way.
there's salvation in the storm,
Yes.
Come
and
on.
not just for us.
Yeah.
Good.
This story reminds me of Jonah quite a lot, and when they were in the storm with Jonah, they also lightened the load.
Yeah.
They started throwing stuff, except for the fact that Jonah was heading somewhere he didn't want to go, and he was heading to somewhere difficult, and he was bailing and he was running, whereas Paul was on the ship going to face it and willing to face it. He was willing to do what God said. Jonah wasn't, and the difference is in the result. Proof's in the pudding. The difference of just standing on it and going, okay, I'll do it. This is really going to be tough. Than running is that, well, firstly, Jonah got thrown away. They were like, get off the boat. Whereas in this scenario, they stop and they listen and they follow Paul, and they get saved, like hundreds of them. So Paul encourages them. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yes.
I absolutely love it. In the storm, we have to have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me.
yeah, yeah.
And what did he tell him? Well, the ship's going to be wrecked, but you'll all be fine. Taking courage is easier for Paul than them because he's standing on his faith in God and his faith in the Word. He's standing on the unchanging, faithful, and mighty, secure God, and his hope's in that, and his hope is not in the boat, whereas their hope was in the boat. But then he gives another flippant comment. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. And I just love it. It's like this. Only the ship be destroyed. We're just going to run aground somewhere on some island. He's so flippant. But I love it because it doesn't matter to him. Because he's got faith. So then we go on to the
He knows
shipwreck.
where he's going.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't really because he doesn't know where this is.
No, but he knows where he's going to end up.
Yeah. He knows it doesn't matter
matter
because
what's
God's got
happening.
him.
Yes.
Doesn't matter where he ends up.
You don't know.
And so, verse 27, on the 14th night, 2 weeks of this crazy storm, we were driven across the Adriatic Sea, which just meant water, so just lots and lots of water.
2 days bad.
When about midnight, the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took surroundings and found that water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. So we're talking like deep, deep water. Fearing that they would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. And I was like, oh, isn't that just great? It's like, okay, we're going to get smashed on those rocks. So the fear kicks in again, and what do again? They drop the anchors. But this time they drop 4 and pray for the sunshine. It's like, that's how bad it got. They needed 4 anchors. It was horrific. So they've had this courage. They've had this encouragement from God. They've had this word from God and this visit from this angel. And they've had hope. But it got worse. And sometimes that's true of us in our lives and our storms.
Exactly right.
That actually we get that. And God's just given us that. Or maybe we've been sensible and we've anchored. But actually there's more to come. But they did it right this time. They dropped 4 anchors and they prayed. And I just think, just to encourage us, like something simple, if you're like, what on earth am I doing, God? Just stop everything and just pray.
Yeah.
It's really quite simple, isn't it? But then sometimes we don't, and sometimes we still get it wrong. And verse 30, some of the sailors got it wrong. In an attempt to escape the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. So they were like, just down here lowering anchors, and they put the little lifeboat down, which cracks me up. They completely bottled it, and I was like, oh, thank God it's not just me. They completely bottled it and wanted to escape. They forgot already, but it's understandable. They needed 4 anchors. They were really scared. They were pooping it. They forgot God's reassurance and Paul's encouragement and went back to steering by their sight and their experience. They were using their sense again. Well, it'll be safer if we just use the lifeboat rather than stay on this ship. And they also tried to pretend they were lowering the anchors. And we do that sometimes too.
Tend, yeah.
We cover up the reality of how we feel. We put on our faith show.
Yeah, it's good.
We drop our anchor, but we don't.
Yeah. Boat's
We
going
say the
down.
right things, but really our faith and our hope and our trust is still in the little lifeboat. in our plan B, or still in the big ship maybe. But we put on the show because we don't really want people to see that we're freaking out and we're ready to abandon ship.
Yeah, it's good.
But Paul says, he speaks to the centurions, and this time they listen. Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved. They were all in it together.
Wow.
They needed to stick with each other because God had given them a plan. They all had to stay on the ship, and then they would receive their salvation. They all had to get through it together. And it just goes to show that we rely on each other, and sometimes there are people, or there are, not sometimes, there are people relying on us for their salvation. And if we jump ship, they can't be saved. And then verse 33, just before dawn, and I love that. It just, the words that came to my mind is hope is on the horizon. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, you've been in constant suspense and have gone without food. And I was like, has anybody else ever lived in that feeling of being in constant suspense? You've got something impending, you've got something there going on in your life, this storm, and actually you've got to kind of almost wait it through to find out whatever's happening, and you have the horrible gut-wrenching anxiety day to day of just being battered by it, and it's really frightening. And normally during that time we don't look after ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't. We really don't. And what I just love is this is really simple, and I'm taking it as kind of just like, firstly, as just as it says. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Like, look after yourselves. Like in the storm, eat. It's really simple. Just look after yourselves because we need our bodies. It's just really practical. And then I love that he followed it with this promise. And in a ridiculous storm like this, he says, not one of you will lose a single hair from your head. How can you promise that and see like that? I go swimming, I think I lose about like half a bunch of it. But that amazing promise. In something that violent and dangerous, not a single hair would be lost. Paul's practical, and sometimes we're over spiritual. So yeah, just we need to eat and look after ourselves. But after that, after he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of all of them. And when we say all of them, we're talking 276 people. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food for themselves. They had themselves a little communion on this ship in the storm. And I think the symbolism here is obviously, we know the symbolism of communion. We know, what is representing Jesus' body. But also I think, we talk about being our daily bread. They haven't had any for 14 days, sorry. And then they're having this bread. And I think we need to look at like the symbolism there of our word. Are we starving ourselves of our word as well? And I just thought one amazing witness of Paul. They were all terribly stressed and worried, and he just fed them and prayed for them and gave thanks to God. Such a simple witness, but something we could do and we can put into practice ourselves. Food and prayer, which I think we all quite like both of them, don't we? So I think that's a good and I thought it was amazing. Have you ever tried to cheer up 10 people? That's hard enough. Let alone cheer up 10 people who've been in a ship for 14 days in a storm. But they actually managed to cheer up 276 people. All were encouraged. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, I love that. We can have as much faith and encouragement from God's word as we want. We can totally eat our fill. When they did that, they lightened the ship by throwing grain into the sea. They weren't going to need it. Because when daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. When the storm's over, guys, we might not be familiar with our new situation or our direction, or what we see in front of us. We might not be familiar with it. They didn't recognize this place. They had no idea where they were. But they recognized it. It was dry. It was land.
Yeah.
And they needed to go find out. And we gotta sometimes allow that ship to go run aground. to be able to go get exploring and find out what it's like, because it might be nice. Verse 40, they cut loose the anchors, and I was like, oh, I don't like that, because that doesn't go with the symbolism. We don't want to cut loose the anchors, because anchors are our hope. And then I looked and read on and kind of saw it a bit differently. They left them in the sea, and at the same time they untied the ropes that held the rudders. And I think at this point we can really look at how the anchors represent really the weight of that ship, of whatever they had their trust in that wasn't God. The weight of those things that we've put our faith and trust in that let us down and that are pulling us back. And the fact the rudders give the direction and the steer, and I think when those things, they cut the ropes or they untied them so that they could allow their faith to steer them, and so that they could go explore the new land. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast, and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life, and he kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land in safety. And I just thought it was really good that not all of us are going to get to jump off and swim. That won't be our exit out of the storm for some of us. Some of us are going to cling on for dear life onto a plank of wood or the remnant of the ship, the leftovers, and just cling on for dear life. But it said everyone reached land in safety. And I think there are some storms that we're able to just go, okay, thank you, God. Dive into the sea and swim to shore. And we might even look quite graceful. And other times we cling on for dear life. But one way or another, they abandoned the ship. They all survived and they made it to land. And I just want to be really encouraged. We will all make it.
Yeah.
We will all make it, just like Paul said. Keep courage, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. And then I took a sneak peek into chapter 28. We're not going to go through it, don't panic. But it says, once safely on the shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. And Malta means honey. There's a plentiful land of honey for us after the storm.
Mm.
Good.
So he began his journey in a court of death and ended in a land of honey. And I quite like that.
Good.
I just thought there were a couple of things that we could apply really. One is that don't put your hope in the boat. And when I was thinking about that, I really felt challenged that Nant Bram was our boat. And we had a lot of hope in the boat. But the boat sometimes has to be sacrificed for the people, because the people are more important than the boat.
Good.
And the other things that I wanted to look at is just like a survival guide for shipwreck. Because I looked back over the story and thought, okay, well, what did Paul have with him? One was he had that guy who was called the best prince.
Yeah.
He had Jesus in the boat. Two was he knew whose he was and who he served.
Yeah.
He knew he was God's, he knew he belonged to, and he knew that it was God that he was serving. Three was he had food. He had bread, he had the word of God. And four, he had prayer. And I think those four things are things that we all have too. Paul's not special in that way, but those things don't apply to us because they absolutely do. So in storms, we need to remember we got Jesus with us. And our hope needs to be in him. That we are God's and we serve him. That we need his word and then we need to pray.